cowboy, do you wander so lost because your thoughts stay between my thighs?" The sun had barely begun its climb above the horizon when Daniel, the young cowboy, swung himself onto his horse. Air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of dew-covered grass and wild flowers that dotted the open plains. His boots dug into the stirrups as he nudged the horse forward, feeling the familiar rhythm beneath him. This was a morning like so many others, yet Daniel sensed a restlessness he couldn't shake. Something inside him felt heavier than the pack he carried on his back. He rode through the rolling hills, where the land stretched wide and endless, the sky painted in soft shades of pink and orange. The wind whispered against his face, but it did not carry away the thoughts swirling in his mind. He wondered about the towns he had passed through, the people he had met, and the choices he had made. Though he had grown up on this land, surrounded by horses, cattle, and the quiet hum of nature, he felt as if he were searching for something he could not name. Daniel remembered the days of his childhood, helping his father mend fences and guide cattle across the ranch. The work was hard, the sun unforgiving, but he had loved it. His father had taught him everything about the land, the trails, the rivers, the hidden valleys where deer often grazed at dawn. Daniel had learned to read the sky, to know when storms were coming, and to trust his instincts. Yet, even with all this knowledge, there was a sense of uncertainty in his heart. It was as if he had wandered too far from something important, something that could not be measured by fences or herds. As he rode, Daniel thought about the people he had met on his travels. He had visited neighboring towns, helping with ranch work or guiding travelers across the plains. But some faces had stayed in his mind. Others had faded like footprints in the sand. One person, in particular, lingered. A woman from a small town he had stopped in last season. She had been kind, strong, and unafraid of speaking her mind. Her laughter had a way of echoing long after it had faded from his ears. Daniel found himself thinking of her more often than he liked to admit. He wondered if she thought of him at all, or if he was just another passing stranger in her memory. The trail ahead wound through a small valley, shaded by tall oak trees that swayed gently in the breeze. Daniel's horse slowed, as if sensing the quiet beauty around them. He let the reins loosen in his hands and took a deep breath, trying to settle the thoughts that would not leave him alone. There was freedom in the wide open land, but there was also loneliness. Being a cowboy meant carrying your burdens alone, facing each day with courage and grit, but it also meant that your heart sometimes ached in ways that could not be soothed by the horizon or the sunset. Daniel's mind drifted back to the night before when he had sat by the fire in his small cabin. The flames had flickered, casting shadows that danced across the wooden walls, and he had stared into the fire, thinking about the road ahead. He had plans. Of course, he wanted to expand the ranch, perhaps even settle down someday. But every time he tried to picture a life rooted in one place, a part of him rebelled. The call of the open plains was too strong, the thrill of riding free too intoxicating. He was a man torn between dreams of stability and the unending pull of the horizon. The morning passed slowly. Birds sang from the branches, their songs mingling with the soft clatter of hooves on the dirt trail. Daniel passed a creek, its waters sparkling in the sunlight, and paused for a moment to let his horse drink. He ran his hand along the animal's neck, feeling the warmth and strength beneath his palm. The horse had been his companion for years, and Daniel often found that the steady presence of another living creature helped calm the restlessness in his heart. As the sun climbed higher, Daniel's thoughts turned to the future. He imagined meeting someone who could understand the life he led, a person who could share in the quiet moments, the long rides, the endless skies. But he also knew that finding such a connection would not be easy. The life of a cowboy was not made for comfort. It was a life of perseverance, solitude, and resilience. Yet, somewhere deep inside, he hoped that his wandering might lead him to more than just work and landscapes. Perhaps it might lead him to a sense of belonging. to a heart that matched the rhythm of his own. By midday, Daniel had reached a ridge overlooking the valley below. Bay. He stopped and gazed out at the land stretched beneath him, dotted with wild flowers and winding streams. The wind carried the scent of distant rain, and the clouds in the sky promised a shift in the weather. For a moment he allowed himself to feel the weight of his worries slip away, replaced by awe at the beauty that surrounded him. He remembered the advice his father had once given him. A man's heart can wander, Daniel, but it's the land that keeps him grounded. Respect it, and it will guide you. Daniel smiled softly, feeling a connection to something greater than himself. The plains, the hills, the rivers, they were constant companions in a life that often felt uncertain. He knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, that there would be moments of doubt and loneliness, but also moments of discovery, joy, and connection. And as he adjusted the reins and urged his horse forward, he felt a quiet determination take root in his chest. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it as he had faced every morning before, one ride at a time, with courage, hope, and a heart open to the possibilities of the world. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, casting a warm glow over the vast plains when Daniel continued his journey. The earlier calm of the morning had settled into a gentle heat, and the earth beneath his horse's hooves seemed to hum with life. He rode steadily, letting his mind wander as freely as the wind, thinking about the life he had led so far and the uncertain future that awaited him. Every mile brought him closer to a new town, a place he had never visited before, yet it felt strangely familiar in his imagination. As he rode, Daniel noticed the small details of the land, the way the wild grass swayed in the breeze, how the sunlight reflected off a distant creek, and how the clouds moved slowly across the sky like drifting ships. These observations were more than mere distractions. They were reminders that life, even in its simplest moments, carried beauty and meaning. Daniel felt that the land spoke to him in quiet ways, guiding him forward even when his own heart felt uncertain. By late morning, he had reached the edge of a forest that bordered the plains. The trees were tall and thick, their leaves whispering secrets with every rustle. Daniel slowed his horse as they entered the shade, enjoying the cool relief from the sun's heat. Here the world felt quieter, almost sacred, and he could hear the soft sounds of nature, the chirping of birds, the crackle of twigs underfoot, and the distant gurgle of a stream hidden among the trees. He thought about how different life was when surrounded by people compared to being alone with nature. In the quiet, he could hear his own thoughts more clearly, and sometimes that was both comforting and unsettling. As he rode deeper into the forest, Daniel thought about the people he had met in his travels. One name came to mind more vividly than the rest. Elena, the woman from the small town he had visited months ago. She had a gentle smile and a strong spirit, and she had welcomed him without hesitation. Even now he could picture her standing in the sunlight, her eyes bright with curiosity and warmth. He had wanted to speak more with her, to learn more about her life, but circumstances had kept him moving. The memory left a bittersweet ache in his heart. Daniel shook his head slightly, trying to focus on the path ahead. The forest, though beautiful, could be tricky to navigate. The trails were narrow, and branches reached out to snag clothing and stirrup straps. But Daniel was experienced. He had learned to read the signs of the land, the tracks of animals, the direction of the wind, and the way the earth changed after rain. Riding through the forest required patience and attention, and as he guided his horse carefully along the winding trail, he felt a sense of focus that was almost meditative. After some time, the forest opened into a small clearing. A crystal-clear stream ran through it, and Daniel decided it was the perfect place to rest. He tied his horse to a nearby tree and stepped down to let his feet touch the soft earth. Kneeling by the water, he cupped his hands and drank, feeling the cool liquid refresh him in ways the sun and air could not. He watched his horse graze nearby, the animal's calm presence easing the tension in Daniel's shoulders. Brass. For a moment, he let himself breathe deeply, taking in the beauty around him and allowing his mind to wander. As he sat by the stream, Daniel reflected on his life as a cowboy. He thought about the long days of work, the quiet nights by the fire, and the simple joys that came from living in tune with nature.
He remembered his father's words. A cowboy's strength is not just in his arms, Daniel, but in his heart.
Keep your heart true, and the land will always guide you. Those words had stayed with him, shaping the way he lived and the choices he made. Even now, they seemed to echo through the forest, a reminder that he was never truly alone as long as he listened to the world around him.
Daniel's thoughts then turned to the towns he had passed and the people he had met there.
Some had been kind, others indifferent, but all had left impressions on him. He thought about the conversations he had shared, the small acts of kindness he had witnessed, and the moments when strangers had become friends, even if only briefly. These memories reminded him that life was not just about surviving or working hard. It was also about connecting with others even in fleeting ways. He stood and stretched, brushing the dirt from his clothes, and began to think about the next stage of his journey. The map he carried showed a town not far from where he now rested, and he knew that he would arrive there by evening. He wondered what kind of people he would meet, what stories they would tell, and what lessons he might learn. The thought of new experiences excited him, but also made him a little anxious. Daniel had learned that life on the road could be unpredictable, full of surprises both good and bad. Mounting his horse again, Daniel followed the stream for a short distance until it led him to a more open path. The forest gradually gave way to rolling hills, and the sky above stretched wide and endless. He felt a renewed sense of freedom, the kind that only came from riding through open land with no fences or boundaries in sight. Yet, even in this freedom, there was a sense of responsibility. The land needed care, the animals needed guidance, and he needed to stay true to his own path. By late afternoon, Daniel spotted smoke rising in the distance. It was the first sign of human life he had seen in many miles, and a sense of anticipation stirred in him. He wondered what kind of town it was, who lived there, and whether he would be welcomed. As he approached, he noticed the layout of the town: small wooden buildings with porches, horses tied to posts, and children playing near the edge of the street. The town had a peaceful, almost timeless quality, and Daniel felt a spark of hope that this place might offer something he had been missing: a connection, a sense of belonging, or simply a chance to rest. Daniel rode into the town slowly, letting his horse move at a gentle pace. People paused to watch him, some nodding and greeting, others returning to their daily tasks. He felt the quiet curiosity of the town, and it reminded him that life was a series of interactions, small gestures that built trust and understanding. As he guided his horse down the main street, he noticed a general store with a welcoming sign and decided it was the perfect place to start. He would need supplies for the next stage of his journey, and perhaps he might learn more about the town and its people. Inside the store, the scent of fresh bread and leather greeted him. Shelves were lined with jars of preserves, tools, and fabrics, and the storekeeper, a middle-aged man with a kind smile, looked up from behind the counter. Daniel introduced himself, and their conversation began simply, about supplies and travel, but soon moved into stories of the town and its history. Daniel listened intently, enjoying the warmth of human connection after so many solitary miles. Panting the sky, in shades of gold and pink, Daniel stepped outside, feeling a quiet sense of contentment. He had traveled far, faced challenges, and still carried the weight of his thoughts, but in this moment, there was a sense of peace. He tied his horse near the store for the night and looked around at the town, imagining the possibilities that awaited him. Perhaps here he would find friends, learn new stories, or even discover a part of himself he had not yet known. With the stars beginning to twinkle overhead, Daniel felt a quiet resolve settle in his heart. He had learned that life was unpredictable, that journeys often led to unexpected places, and that even in solitude one could find meaning and beauty. As he prepared for the night, he allowed himself a moment to dream, to hope, and to imagine what the next day might bring. The plains stretched endlessly before him, but for the first time in a long while he felt that he was not completely alone on his path. The morning sun rose gently over the small town, casting golden light across the wooden rooftops and dirt streets. Daniel stirred from his sleep in the modest room we had rented above the general store. The quiet of the night had left him with a sense of calm, but also a lingering restlessness. He stretched, ran a hand through his hair, and glanced out the window. Below, the town was already stirring. Shopkeepers opening doors, children running to fetch water, and farmers leading their animals toward the fields. Daniel dressed quickly and headed downstairs, eager to start another day in this new place. The town had a warmth that few others possessed, not just in its people, but in the way life moved here, slowly and deliberately, yet filled with purpose. The air smelled faintly of bread, smoke, and earth, and Daniel inhaled deeply, appreciating the simplicity of it all. He was a stranger here, but he felt a quiet welcome in the town's rhythms. After breakfast, Daniel decided to explore the town. He walked past the small wooden homes, nodding politely to those he passed. Some waved, others simply smiled, but every interaction carried a sense of connection he had not felt in months of solitary travel.
He observed the children playing near a well, their laughter echoing off the walls of nearby buildings, and he felt a small warmth in his chest.
In these moments, he remembered why he had chosen this life of travel and work, not just for freedom, but to truly see the world and the people in it.
As he walked further, he noticed a notice board outside the town hall.
Breath. Flyers for lost animals, local events, and town meetings were pinned there. One particular notice caught his eye. The town was organizing a community harvest festival in a few days. Farmers and townsfolk would gather to celebrate the season's work, share food, and enjoy music and games. Daniel felt a spark of curiosity and a faint hope. Perhaps this festival would allow him to meet more people, learn their stories, and feel more a part of this place, even if only for a short time. He continued down the main street, eventually reaching a small stable where horses were tied, being groomed and fed by their owners. Daniel approached the stable, and the caretaker, a young man named Thomas, greeted him warmly. They exchanged a few words about horses, their care, and the challenges of managing them. Daniel found comfort in talking about horses, a topic that connected him to his past and his present. He shared some stories from his travels, tales of wide-open plains, sudden storms, and animals he had guided safely back to their herds. Thomas listened intently, asking questions and laughing at some of Daniel's more humorous experiences. By late morning, Daniel realized he had spent hours wandering through the town, learning its corners and meeting its people. He decided it was time to see the surrounding land, to feel the plains stretch beneath him again, and to regain the sense of freedom that only the open spaces could bring. He mounted his horse outside the stable and began to ride toward the outskirts of the town, where the hills rose gently into the distance. The ride was peaceful, with the soft sound of hooves on dirt paths and the wind brushing against his face. Daniel let his thoughts wander once again, thinking about the town, its people, and the warmth he felt despite being a newcomer. He thought about the fleeting friendships he had formed on his travels, and how they often left him feeling both grateful and slightly empty when it was time to move on. Yet in this place there was a sense that connections could last, that bonds could grow slowly, nurtured by shared work, laughter, and trust. As he reached a ridge overlooking the fields, Daniel spotted a figure in the distance. A woman was tending to a small garden, her movements careful and deliberate. The sunlight caught the strands of her hair, and for a moment, Daniel was captivated by the quiet strength she seemed to carry. Disbay did not know her, yet something about the way she moved, so absorbed in her work, drew his attention. He slowed his horse, unsure if he should approach or simply watch from afar. Curiosity eventually won, and he guided his horse closer. The woman noticed him and paused, wiping her hands on her apron. She smiled politely, and Daniel returned the gesture. He introduced himself, and her name was Anna. She had lived in the town her whole life, helping her family with their farm and working in the community. Daniel felt a strange comfort in speaking with her. There was a calmness in her voice and a sincerity in her eyes that reminded him of the kind of people he had met in towns he had grown to love along his journeys. They spoke for a while about the land, the crops, and the challenges of farming. Daniel shared some of his own experiences with animals and the plains, and Anna listened, genuinely interested. Conversation flowed easily between them, as if they had known each other longer than a few minutes. Daniel realized that part of what he had been searching for during his travels was this simple, honest connection with someone who understood life, work, and the quiet beauty of the world. After some time, they were joined by a few other townsfolk who had come to tend their own gardens and check on the crops. Daniel helped where he could, lending his hands and skills to the tasks at hand. The work was rewarding, not just physically, but emotionally. He felt a sense of purpose and belonging, a feeling he had rarely experienced on the open road. The sun climbed higher, but Daniel barely noticed, lost in the rhythm of work and conversation. As midday approached, the group gathered for a brief rest under the shade of a large oak tree base. They shared stories, jokes, and laughter, and Daniel felt a warmth in his heart that went beyond the sun's heat. Here, in this small corner of the world, he felt part of something larger, a community that valued work, honesty, and kindness. Even though he had only arrived recently, he sensed that his presence was welcomed, and that for the first time in a long while he was not entirely alone.
After the break, Daniel helped with more tasks, moving hay, repairing fences, and guiding animals back to their pens.
Each task, though simple, gave him satisfaction. He realized that life was not just about traveling and seeing new places. It was also about creating connections, contributing to a community, and finding joy in shared effort. He found himself thinking less about the loneliness he had carried on the plains and more about the possibilities of forming meaningful bonds in this town. By late afternoon, Daniel took a break and rode toward a small hill overlooking the town and the surrounding plains. From this vantage point, he could see the entire valley, the houses, the fields, and the distant forest edges. He felt a deep sense of peace, the kind that came from understanding one's place in the world, even if only temporarily. The town, with its people and routines, seemed alive and comforting, a stark contrast to the solitude he had known for so long. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, Daniel returned to the town. The streets were quieter now, with the day's work mostly done. He guided his horse to the stable and fed it, feeling the familiar comfort of caring for his companion, Base. Then he walked toward the center of the town where a small gathering was forming. People were preparing for the harvest festival, stringing lights, arranging tables, and sharing food. Daniel watched for a moment, feeling a growing excitement. This festival promised not just celebration, but an opportunity to connect further with the town and its people. That evening, as he returned to his rented room, Daniel reflected on the day. He had met Anna, helped with the farm work, and witnessed the quiet beauty of a community that cared for each other. Though he was still a traveler, a man whose heart wandered as freely as the plains, he felt a growing attachment to this place. Perhaps, he thought, life did not always require endless movement. Perhaps it also allowed for moments of pause, for finding connections and for discovering a sense of home, even if temporary, along the journey. He lay in bed that night, listening to the soft sounds of the town outside his window, and thought about the future. The road would call again, but for now, he could rest. He could learn, observe, and grow, all while forming bonds that made the world richer and more meaningful. And as he drifted to sleep, he carried with him the quiet hope that the days ahead would bring new friendships, lessons, and perhaps a deeper understanding of what it meant to belong somewhere, even if only for a little while. The morning light filtered softly through the window of Daniel's rented room, painting the wooden floor in shades of gold. He rose slowly, stretching his limbs and letting the calm of the early day wash over him. Brr. The town was beginning to wake. The soft sounds of footsteps, the distant clatter of carts, and the occasional neigh of a horse reminded him that life here moved steadily, predictably, and yet with a quiet energy all its own. Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose today, as though the town itself had infused him with the kind of determination that comes from feeling part of something larger than oneself. After breakfast, Daniel decided to continue exploring the surrounding land. He had spent the last 2 days in the town, meeting people, helping with farm work, and learning the rhythm of life here. Yet, the plains and hills called to him still. There was a pull in his heart that he could not ignore, a reminder that his spirit had been formed by open skies, endless trails, and the freedom of movement. Mounting his horse, he waved to Anna, who was tending to her garden, and set off toward the edge of the town where the fields met the rolling hills. As he rode, Daniel reflected on the small moments that had shaped him. He thought about his father, who had taught him everything about riding, caring for animals, and reading the land. He remembered the evenings by the fire, listening to stories of courage, hard work, and resilience. Those lessons had stayed with him through years of wandering, giving him the strength to face long days, storms, and the loneliness that often accompanied life on the trail. But yet, despite all he had learned, there remained an emptiness he could not quite fill. A longing for connection, understanding, and perhaps something he had yet to name. The trail led him to a wide, open meadow where wildflowers swayed gently in the breeze, and the sound of a distant river added a calming rhythm to the scene. Daniel dismounted and let his horse graze, taking a moment to drink in the beauty of the land. He noticed the subtle changes in the environment, the way the sunlight caught the edges of leaves, the distant mountains softened by morning mist, and the quiet movement of wildlife. Phew. These small details reminded him that life was composed of many tiny, meaningful moments, each one contributing to the larger tapestry of existence. While resting, Daniel thought about Anna and the people he had met in the town. Her quiet strength and warmth had left an impression on him that he could not ignore.
There was something genuine in the way she moved through life, a balance of determination and kindness that seemed rare.
Daniel wondered about the future, whether his path would continue to take him farther from people and places he cared about, or whether he might find a place where he could pause and grow roots, even if only temporarily. After some time, he mounted his horse again and rode toward the river that ran along the edge of the meadow. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and Daniel paused to let his horse drink while he studied the riverbank. Birds skimming the surface of the water and fish darting beneath the clear current. The scene reminded him of the delicate balance of life. The way every creature, every action, had an impact on the larger world. He felt humbled by this awareness and grateful for the opportunity to witness it firsthand. As he followed the river upstream, Daniel noticed smoke rising in the distance from a small cabin hidden among the trees. Curiosity drew him closer. As he approached, he saw an elderly man tending a small vegetable garden near the cabin. Daniel greeted him politely, and the man smiled warmly, introducing himself as Mr. Whitaker. He had lived here for decades, working the land and caring for his animals with patience and dedication. Daniel listened intently as Mr. Whitaker shared stories of the river, the seasons, and the changes he had witnessed over the years. There was a wisdom in the man's voice, a calm assurance that Daniel found deeply reassuring. They spent the afternoon together, tending the garden, feeding chickens, and repairing a small section of fence near the cabin. The work was steady and honest, and Daniel found a quiet satisfaction in it. He realized that part of his restlessness came from a lack of connection, not just to people, but to the act of contributing meaningfully to life in a place. Here, even in a temporary setting, he could feel that sense of purpose growing. The conversation with Mr. Bob Bay Whitaker further reinforced this feeling as the man spoke of patience, responsibility, and the importance of living in harmony with the land. By late afternoon, Daniel bid Mr. Whitaker farewell and rode back toward the town. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the plains and turning the sky into a canvas of oranges and purples. As he approached, he noticed townsfolk preparing for the upcoming harvest festival. Tables were being arranged, lights strung between buildings, and the smell of baked bread and roasting meats filled the air. The excitement was contagious, and Daniel felt a sense of anticipation he had not experienced in years. The festival promised more than entertainment. It offered connection, community, and a chance to see the bonds between people in full bloom. Back in the town, Daniel returned to the general store to gather supplies for the evening. He exchanged greetings with familiar faces and offered a helping hand where needed. There was a sense of rhythm in the preparation, a kind of dance that each person knew by heart. Daniel watched the interactions, noticing the subtle ways people cared for one another, the careful placement of food on tables, the encouragement offered to children, and the laughter shared between neighbors. These small gestures reminded him that life was not just about surviving or achieving goals. It was about nurturing relationships, honoring effort, and appreciating the beauty in everyday acts. As dusk approached, Daniel found Anna near the town square, helping set up decorations for the festival. She smiled as he approached, and they worked together, arranging flowers and hanging lanterns. Conversation flowed easily, filled with shared stories, laughter, and the occasional thoughtful silence. Daniel felt a quiet admiration for her, her dedication, her patience, and the way she seemed to find joy even in small, ordinary tasks. He realized that in many ways the festival preparation mirrored life itself, a series of small, meaningful actions that, when combined, created something beautiful and lasting. The sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear. The town square glowed with lantern light, casting warm reflections on the faces of those gathered. Daniel watched as children played games, families shared food, and neighbors exchanged stories. There was music, gentle and melodic, and the sound of laughter echoed across the square. For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt a deep sense of belonging, not rooted in permanence, but in the shared human experience of community, kindness, and celebration. As the night progressed, Daniel and Anna took a moment to step away from the bustling square. They walked along a quiet path near the river, the moonlight casting silver reflections on the water. The conversation turned to hopes, dreams, and the paths their lives had taken. Daniel shared some of his experiences on the plains, the challenges he had faced, and the lessons he had learned. Anna spoke of her own life, the joys and struggles of tending the land, and the satisfaction she found in being part of a community that cared for one another. In that quiet moment, Daniel realized that the restlessness he had carried for so long was not about the land, the distance traveled, or the freedom he sought. It was about connection, understanding, and finding a sense of belonging. And while he may continue to wander, he understood now that these moments, brief, shared, and meaningful, were as important as the journeys themselves. The world was vast, unpredictable, and often challenging, but it was also filled with beauty, kindness, and the potential for deep human connection. As they returned to the town square, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose and hope. The festival continued late into the night, filled with music, laughter, and shared stories, and while he was still a traveler at heart, he knew that he had discovered something invaluable, a glimpse of home, friendship, and the quiet power of belonging. As he prepared to rest once more, he allowed himself to feel grateful for the day, the people, and the lessons that had brought him closer to understanding what truly mattered in life. The morning arrived slowly, bringing a soft golden light that filled the town with warmth. Breaths. Daniel woke to the quiet sounds of roosters crowing and the distant lowing of cattle in the fields. He stretched and sat by the window for a few minutes, taking in the view of the town slowly coming to life. The harvest festival from the night before had left a lingering sense of joy in the air. Yes. Children ran about with small ribbons and flowers in their hair, neighbors exchanged greetings with laughter, and the scent of fresh bread and coffee wafted through the streets. Daniel felt a calm happiness that he hadn't known in months of travel. He dressed quickly, eager to enjoy the day, and mounted his horse. Riding through the quiet streets, he noticed familiar faces waving as he passed, and he returned their greetings with a smile. Today, he wanted to explore the hills beyond the town once more, to enjoy the wide-open spaces that had shaped his life as a cowboy. As he left the town behind, the familiar feeling of freedom washed over him. The wind against his face, the steady rhythm of his horse's hooves, and the endless horizon stretching before him. Daniel rode toward a ridge overlooking the valley, a place he had discovered the day before. From this vantage point, the town looked small, almost like a model in a miniature world, yet it held a kind of beauty and life that made it feel significant. He dismounted and let his horse graze nearby, sitting on a rock and gazing out at the landscape. The plains, the forests, the river winding through the valley, it all seemed so vast, so alive, and yet so peaceful. In this moment, Daniel felt a balance between his love for the open road and his growing affection for the town and its people. His thoughts turned to Anna. She had become a familiar presence in his life, someone whose calm strength and gentle spirit brought a sense of comfort he had not expected. Daniel remembered their conversations along the river, the way she listened with patience and understanding, and the way her smile had a quiet warmth that lingered long after she had looked away. He realized that part of what he had been searching for in his travels was not just adventure or freedom, but connection. People who understood and accepted him, even in his restless moments. As he sat on the ridge, Daniel noticed smoke rising from a small farmhouse in the distance.
Curious, he decided to ride closer.
The trail was narrow, winding through the hills and past clusters of wildflowers. Birds sang overhead, and the occasional rustle of a small animal in the grass reminded him of how alive the land truly was. He felt a sense of anticipation, unsure of what he might discover, but certain that the journey itself was meaningful. When he arrived, he found an elderly woman tending a small garden beside the farmhouse. She looked up and smiled warmly, greeting him as though she had been expecting a visitor. Daniel returned the greeting and introduced himself. Her name was Margaret, and she had lived in the valley her entire life. She spoke with a calm authority about the land, the changing seasons, and the importance of caring for both people and nature. Daniel listened closely, fascinated by her stories and inspired by the depth of knowledge she shared. They spent the morning working together, planting seeds, fixing a small section of fence, and tending to the animals. Daniel felt a deep satisfaction in the work, not just because it was physically rewarding, but because it connected him to something larger than himself. He realized that life was a series of small, meaningful actions, each contributing to the greater whole. Margaret's wisdom, coupled with the rhythm of labor, gave him a sense of grounding he had rarely experienced in his travels. By midday, Daniel prepared to leave, thanking Margaret for her hospitality.
She encouraged him to continue exploring, reminding him that the land always held lessons for those willing to observe.
He felt a quiet sense of gratitude, not just for the practical knowledge she had shared, but for the reminder that life was a tapestry of connections, experiences, and understanding. Riding back toward town, Daniel reflected on how much he had changed in just a few days. The festival, his conversations with Anna, the work with Mr. Float, Whitaker and Margaret, it all had shifted something inside him. The restlessness that had often driven him to move from place to place had softened, replaced with a growing appreciation for the people and moments that made life meaningful. He realized that travel and solitude were important, but so too were connection, community, and shared experiences. As he approached the town square, he saw preparations underway for an evening gathering at the town hall. Music instruments were being tuned, tables set with food, and children rehearsing a small performance. Daniel decided to join in, helping to arrange chairs and offering a hand wherever needed. Butte. He noticed Anna nearby, laughing with some of the children as they practiced their dance. She looked up and saw him, and her smile brought a warmth to his chest. He realized that while the town itself was beautiful, the people, Anna in particular, were what made it feel like a home, even temporarily. The evening gathering began as the sun dipped below the horizon. Base. Lanterns were lit, casting a soft glow over the town square. Music floated through the air, blending with laughter and conversation. Daniel watched as families shared stories, neighbors exchanged thoughtful words, and children ran freely between the tables. There was a sense of joy and belonging that seemed to radiate from every interaction. Daniel felt a quiet pride in being part of this moment, even as a newcomer.
He understood that true richness in life came not from possessions or fame, but from shared experiences, kindness.
Later, as the gathering continued, Daniel found himself walking along a quiet path near the river with Anna. The moon reflected on the water, casting silver light across the ripples. They spoke softly about their lives, dreams, and hopes. Daniel shared his experiences as a cowboy, the places he had seen, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned. Anna spoke of her family, the joy she found in tending the land, and the satisfaction she felt in helping her community thrive. They found comfort in each other's words, and Daniel realized that connection, honest, meaningful connection, was what he had been searching for all along. As the night deepened, the festival continued, but Daniel and Anna lingered near the river, enjoying the calm and the companionship. He felt a sense of balance he had rarely known, a harmony between the freedom of the open road and the fulfillment that came from shared experience. Daniel understood that life would always bring challenges, solitude, and moments of uncertainty, but he had discovered that it also brought beauty, joy, and people who made the journey worthwhile.
Returning to the town square, Daniel felt a quiet sense of closure and renewal.
He had traveled far, faced challenges, and experienced loneliness, but in the town he had found connection, purpose, and hope. He realized that his wandering heart did not need to choose between freedom and belonging. He could have both at different times, in different ways. The key was embracing the moments of connection, the lessons of the land, and the people who crossed his path. That night, as Daniel lay in his rented room, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He thought about the plains, the hills, the rivers, and the towns he had passed. He remembered the friends he had made, the guidance he had received, and the moments of quiet reflection that had shaped his heart. Daniel understood that life was a journey of discovery, not just of places, but of self, and of the relationships that gave meaning to existence. He closed his eyes, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the experiences that had brought him here. Tomorrow he would ride again, explore further, and continue learning from the world around him. But tonight, he could rest, knowing that he had found something rare and precious, the understanding that freedom and connection were not opposites, but parts of the same journey. And as he drifted into sleep, the gentle sounds of the town outside his window reminded him that he was, for the first time in a long while, exactly where he was meant to be.